Okay, guys, it's Tim O'Connor, Tim for Liberty on Facebook at Tim for 51. And joining me tonight, guys, it's Tom Stebbins of the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York State. And of course, our old friend, you guys have seen him before, Jim Dayton, Emmy Liberty, Wayne County Chairman of the LPNY, or well, however you say that. Okay, guys. But remember, one of my sayings, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's courage to continue that counts. And guys that are engaged in lawsuit reform know what I'm talking about. So, Tom, what I want to do is introduce you to everybody.
Sure.
And tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, because you have a really interesting story here as to what you do for at least your main hustle is really interesting to me.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, I fight against the trial lawyers, and I fight against their agenda in Albany. And we as Americans, you hear about these crazy lawsuits. You know that there's these suits all filed all the time, but what you don't know is that there are laws that have been passed that allow these lawsuits to be filed. They allow these lawsuits to be profitable. They allow this kind of abuse to take place, and it allows people to essentially abuse our legal system for profit. And the only way you can abuse our legal system for profit is by taking money from somebody else, right? That's what our legal system does. It doesn't generate money. It takes money from one person and gives it to another. And the intermediary is a personal injury lawyer. And that personal injury lawyer takes 33% generally. And so they're inclined to sue anybody they possibly can. And in the meantime, take a little bit out of your pocket, take a little bit out of everybody else's pocket, and take a hefty sum for themselves. And this is all being propagated by the laws that they're passing in Albany. And that's why I wanted to come on today. I wanted to talk to you guys about some of those laws.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so one of the things that we like to talk about, especially as libertarians, and I think you touched on it right now, is that what seems to happen all too often is that a powerful special interest group funds a campaign to get a law put on the books. We see it on the national level with Big Pharma. We see it on the New York State level with a couple of the laws that we're going to talk about tonight. So the first law, Amy, you're particularly affected by the first law that we're going to talk about. You want to lead us down this path here?
Yeah, the Scaffold Act, Labor Law 240, 241. Pretty much any injury caused by gravity, the business owner or property owner are completely on the hook for.
100% liable. And you're right. It's gravity. It's not just, there doesn't have to be any negligence. There just has to be gravity. And I had one contractor joke with me, said, so if it happens on Earth, it's my fault. And that's essentially what the scaffold law is. If it happens on Earth, it's the fault of the contractor and, importantly, the property owner. So, the people that own property, whether that is sometimes us as taxpayers, right? So you and me, we own the highways. We own some of the municipal buildings and those sorts of things. And if there is an accident involving gravity on one of those properties, then you as the contractor and us as the taxpayer, we're on the hook for that. And New York is the only place to have it. It was launched in the 1880s that this came about. And since then, every other state has said, we have a workers' comp system. That's what pays workers when they're injured, workers' comp. But in New York, we have this double system. You have the workers' comp claim, which you file, and then on top of that, you file the scaffold law claim. Now, anywhere else, that would be a negligence claim because you'd have to prove negligence. But in New York, you don't have to prove negligence at all. You just have to prove that it was gravity. And once you've done that, then you're good. And you can then sue for the workers' comp, get paid on that, sue under the scaffold law, labor law 240, and get paid on that. And that's why, if you're up late at night, you're watching TV, or, during the day, you see a lot of ads for trial lawyers. And you see a lot of those ads, they show a job on the construction sites, because in New York, those lawsuits are essentially a gimme. They're a gimme putt. They're a layup. You can't really mess it up. I mean, all you have to do is prove that it happened on, essentially on Earth, which is a relatively easy thing for a lawyer to prove. I'll never forget, actually, I was speaking to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce down in Puerto Rico. They had an event and they had me speak there. And I had just seen an ad. Somebody had sent me this scaffold law ad where a man is falling off a building and they got him on the green screen. And while he's falling, he picks up the phone and calls the lawyer, right?
I saw that.
And the lawyer, and it's all in Spanish. He's like, hola. And the lawyer picks up the phone and they talk in Spanish for a little bit. And then the lawyer like authoritatively puts the phone down and like, claro, and he puts the phone down. And then the guy lands in a limousine with 2 models in bikinis, right? So that is essentially what they were selling. They were selling get injured, get rich. And that's a problem. I mean, that's a real problem. And we're all paying for that, whether it's higher construction costs for all of us taxpayers, whether you're getting your roof done, whatever it is, or, just the fact that it is expensive to do business here in New York. And this is easily, without question, the most expensive statute on the books in New York, in my opinion. Other people,
if you don't mind me jumping in for a second here.
Sure.
And I just want to blow up our understanding of this because I am a contractor. I've always had workers' comp on my guys.
Yep.
And workers' comp in and of itself is pretty expensive. And all you contractors out there know this. So what we're saying here is workers' comp, and then on top of workers' comp, this scaffold law creates these big payouts. Now,
exactly. It's your general liability on top of your workers' comp. And you may find your general liability policy in the state of New York is generally going to cost 3 to 10 times more than it would in any other state. And that's if you can get it. Most insurers don't want to write general liability in New York because they know that you're 100% liable. You as the contractor is 100% liable. How are they going to cover that? They're going to lose every time. So most insurers don't write the policies at all. So you go to any other state, you'd have 30, 40, 50 different insurance carriers begging for your business. In New York, they don't even want it. They don't even want it, and they can charge you 10 times more than they could anywhere else. And that's what drives me nuts is the trial lawyers and the people who advocate for this law. They say, oh, it's all the insurance companies. The insurance companies are jacking everybody. The insurance companies are screwing everybody. They're not writing policies. They don't want to do business here, right? So how can they be jacking people? Like what insurance company was like, oh, we're making all this money in New York. We're going to leave. That's absurd.
Look, you hit on another myth, right? That is so prevalent in New York State. It absolutely drives me crazy that every big business is corrupt, rich, and wants to steal your money. Like we talk about profitable businesses. So they're going to look at, oh, you're a contractor, you have a profitable business. And it's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I barely make enough money to get by. Okay. Like I'm not joking. It's tough. I work hard. Amy, what do you want to say about that? Like, let's talk about just how hard it is to make money in New York State and then to be looked at like you're some kind of evil cretin who just exists to like profit off of innocent people. Like, talk about that for me.
It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter how good of a company you are, how small of a company, how big of a company. It doesn't matter. When those trial lawyers get in line and start taking money, all of these businesses have to pay insurance. We have to. Therefore, those trial lawyers are getting money from the insurance companies, and it doesn't matter who is paying into these insurance companies. They have to then distribute that money to these trial lawyers, to these settlements and stuff like that. Everybody's getting screwed. And
I mean, insurance is one of the most highly regulated industries in the entire country. And you have all these people saying, oh, these businesses, they want to cut corners so their people get injured. Nobody wants that, right? Like, nobody don't want your people injured. The idea that businesses are like, hey, I'm going to save some money and then Jim's going to get injured. No, Jim works for you. You like Jim. You know Jim. You don't want Jim to get injured. That's crazy. And you're absolutely right about the issue of the big businesses for the small business. This is a big problem with the scaffold law, is that it treats the business that is unsafe and it treats the business that is safe exactly the same, 100% liability. So if you have one business that is 90% responsible for the injury of their worker, and then you have another one that's 10% responsible, they're both 100% responsible in New York. And the problem with that is then the people that are 90% responsible, that are unsafe contractors, they aren't punished by the market in any way. Whereas the people who are safe are punished exactly the same. They both pay 100%. And so you have the unsafe and the safe treated exactly the same. And then that's part of the reason that the insurers don't want to do business here, is because they don't know who's safe or unsafe, because everybody's 100% liable all the time.
If I hear you right, let me distill this out. It will be easily more profitable to be an unsafe operator because of the scaffold law. Would that be a fair way of putting it? It's
not more profitable or less profitable. It's just the same, right? Like you're essentially the same, right? You're going to be treated 100% liable no matter what. So if you're 99% responsible, you're going to be treated 100%. And if you're 1% responsible, you're treated 100%. So you're both going to pay the same.
It is more profitable for those who dodge paying insurance or getting permits. And
that's a great point. You know, I know you have a lot of folks in the Southern Tier, and we've been hearing from a lot of our Southern Tier contractors that people are coming across from Pennsylvania. They don't tell their insurer that they are working in New York, because if they did, they would have to pay an outrageous premium to do that, right? But they show their client, hey, I've got insurance. Here it is, right? It just doesn't cover them in New York. So you have all these Southern Tier contractors who are getting poached by Pennsylvania contractors, and in my area in Albany, Massachusetts contractors or Vermont contractors, because they don't have the New York insurance, right? So they don't have to pay for it. So they can undercut everybody on the bid, right? So because they're not paying as much of the insurance. Now, if somebody gets injured, then there's a real problem because they don't have coverage. But that's another issue. But this is the kind of perverse incentive that the scaffold law has caused.
All right. So that perverse incentive, let me expand on what I was trying to say. And I think that we basically agree, right? If two contractors bid on the same job, one says, I'll rush my guys through unsafe. And then one guy says, well, this is how much I've got to charge because I keep my guys safe. That's an area where scaffold law, because they're both treated exactly the same, scaffold law would incentivize rushing through projects and almost making their guys less safe just so that they can get a better bid out there.
No, but the problem with it is somebody has to get injured, right?
Right.
That's the thing. And as we talked about, nobody wants their people to get injured, right? So
correct.
That's the real issue, is that it's not that it's more profitable or less profitable. It's just that the liability is the same. And that's the problem. The market can't punish people who are, more unsafe. It just can't do that because everybody's 100% liable.
Yeah. Guys, as you guys all know, you've met Rich Pertel hanging out with me on these lives before. First of all, he's also in a small contracting business. Guys, congratulations to Rich, by the way. He decided to run as a libertarian in Tioga County for the county legislative race. He got 20 signatures tonight. I think that puts him about half the way there. But he has experience and hands-on understanding of this stuff. So normal workers' compensation has an experience multiplier, which encourages safety. You're right that if the rates for scaffold law injuries are always the same, that doesn't pressure improvement. And I think so we're basically all in agreement, even though we're approaching it from different angles. What do you think about that comment, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, presumably you're going to have the issue here is not the rate of injury, but the percent of which you're responsible, right? So in New York, you're always 100% responsible. But if you're going to have more injuries, right, that's going to come eventually, that's going to get noticed, right? But correct. In the short term, like when you have the two people, the two contractors, and they're both held exactly the same liability standard, regardless of how much they contributed to the accident, That's where it gets problematic. But I want to hit on a couple of things here to get a sense of how much this costs, right? You guys, private industry, paying billions of dollars in additional insurance on this. But the public is paying an estimated $765 million in costs on this. And that's cost to highways, cost to bridges, cost to school construction, those kinds of things. So the School Construction Authority alone estimates that this cost them over $200 million a year. I had a member of the School Construction Authority say to me, for that price, I could bus all the kids in New York City to New Jersey, right? Because it is such a huge cost. And you think about $200 million, I mean, it starts to get to be funny money, right? But you could build lots of new schools. You could build new classrooms. You could hire new teachers. And then the same on the bridges. It was estimated that this added $200 to $400 million to the cost of the Tappan Zee or Mario Cuomo Bridge. And, you know, those kinds of costs, we've got to make that up. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do it in tolls. We're going to do it in taxes. That's how that money has to get made back. And that's the real problem. I mean, we're all paying for this, whether as taxpayers or anytime we do any sort of building.
Already in New York State, we see we're among the highest tax states in the nation. We regularly experience costs that other states don't experience. And now what you're talking about, what you're pointing your finger at, is one in particular instance that basically drives small guys out of business, benefits big guys, and adds millions and millions and millions of dollars to our infrastructure projects. Am I right about that one?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right in it punishing the small businesses over the large businesses, right? So the large businesses, they might have, you know, work that they're doing in several states, so they can spread those costs over their other projects. Whereas a small business owner, and especially a business owner just getting started, you know, one of the big supporters of us is the MWBEs, the minority and women-owned businesses. Because so many of them, as they try to get into the market, find out that they can't get the insurance. And this is the problem that we were talking about before, is people want to blame the insurers and say that's why the prices are so high. They're not writing policies. They are not covering people, right? If they were jacking everybody and making money hand over fist, there would be a lot of them. But you have so many national insurers who write in 49 other states, and they don't write construction insurance here in New York because of the scaffold law. And so for small businesses, for minority and women-owned businesses, they can't get the insurance. And if you can't get the insurance, you can't get the jobs. And if you can't get the jobs, you can't hire people in your own area. You can't grow your business. It's as simple as that.
I remember it took years for me to get a workers' comp policy on my guys, outside of the New York State Insurance Fund, whose rates and patterns of charging you are absolutely ridiculous. Okay. They want basically all their money up front. So basically, I think you're highlighting for us small contractors, for us small businessmen, exactly why that happens, right? No one wants to write a workers' comp policy in New York State until you have a major amount of experience behind you. Then up until that point, you have to go through New York State Insurance Fund. And guys, I'm telling you, they want $15,000 on January 1st. And if you don't give it to them, you can't get workers' comp. It's a bizarre system. And I think guys like Tom, guys like Gimme, guys like myself, Tom's actually doing this work. Lawsuit Reform Alliance group. Can you tell us more about what's going on? Because I have a link up here for people to donate to. And I want to know more about that.
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit. We are supported by doctors, hospitals, small businesses, manufacturers, all sorts of companies, big and small, individuals, anybody who's essentially concerned about the impact of frivolous litigation, excessive lawsuits on our economy and on our culture, right? I mean, I know, for example, you know, a school they stopped having balls at recess because they were worried about the liability, right? That has a cultural impact. Kids can't have balls at recess. I know in my area in Saratoga, which is just north of Albany where I am, they decided that they got rid of jungle gyms because they were worried that in the winter that they would be slippery and a kid would slip off the jungle gym. So now you don't have jungle gyms. No balls, no jungle gyms. Kids are just going to stand outside with their thumbs in their noses. And that's what recess is going to be, right? That has a cultural impact. So, it's not just the costs, and the costs are everywhere. We're talking about construction insurance, but our medical liability costs are higher in New York than they are anywhere else, right? If you're a doctor trying to practice in New York, you pay more for medical liability insurance than you would anywhere else. And then we have the same availability problem. So a lot of, for example, OBGYNs do not practice. And I think the last I checked was 13 counties have no OBGYN services. So if you want to have a baby in those counties, tough luck. You got to go to the next county over because we got no OBGYNs. And a big part of that is the medical costs, right? If you're a doctor and you know that every year you got to pay, say, $150,000 in insurance costs versus paying, let's say, $50,000 somewhere else, why would you practice here, right? Why would you want to do that? And a big reason for that, like I'll give you a good example of one of the reasons for that, is it like the statute of limitations on a birth defect, right? So if you have a birth defect, you can sue up until you're 18. Now, I would think that you would know if you had a birth defect sometime before you're 18. And I remember being on the subway in New York City and I saw an ad that said something like, kid not doing well in school, could it have been something at birth? Call XYZ law firm. So if little Timmy sucks at math, all of a sudden it's the OBGYN's fault who used the wrong size forceps. Like, that's absurd. Little Timmy just sucks at math. Like, that's the problem. And not everything should be an actionable lawsuit. Not everything should be a problem of somebody else. And that's the same cultural impact that we talked about before. So yeah, we are represented by a lot of groups, including doctors and hospitals and the OBGYNs, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists.
Yeah, I don't want to get defensive, but I'm actually pretty good with math. I just want to be clear about that. I studied statistics. I took some calculus. Like, I'm okay with math.
That's all right. He was talking about Jim falling off a roof earlier. So
no, that was
I wanted to go back to something actually on the scaffold law, which is the issue of intoxication. I think nothing drives the issue of the scaffold law home more than the fact that the contractor is 100% liable, even if the employee was intoxicated, right? So if somebody just had a 3-martini lunch and they decide to get up onto a roof and start doing their favorite dance moves, that's the fault of the contractor, not the man who had 3 martinis at lunch. And so, even for people who aren't contractors, I know you guys are contractors and I'm so steeped in this, it's hard to understand what does 100% liability mean. I think that really drives it home. Even if somebody is drunk, it's not their fault. It's the fault of the contractor and property owner.
Yep. And guys, did you hear what he just said about property owners? This means that if you hire a guy that's unsafe, that creates an issue, gets injured, everybody gets sued. The people that you're working on their house, all of them get sued.
But importantly, actually, the New York State Legislature, in their wisdom, and you'll never hear me say that again, they passed a law, I think in the 80s, that exempted single homeowners from a scaffold law claim. So if you have your own house and there's somebody working on your roof, then you're not responsible. Only the contractor is, right? But if you have a multifamily home, then you're screwed. And recently there was a case where they decided that because somebody had a home office, sound familiar in pandemic? Because somebody had a home office, it wasn't a single family home. I no longer have an office. I work out of my home. So that single home exemption that the legislature passed in the 80s or whenever it was, that might be a lot less applicable because so many people are working from home now. And everybody does work out of home, right? Even if you have an office, you're on your phone, working from home, on your laptop, whatever. That's just the nature of work these days.
Yep.
I agree with that. Let's one of the things that you and I talked about in our emails as we were preparing for the show is what we would I want to call them runaway verdicts when it comes to when there's no cap on the limits of these lawsuits for basically personal injury. Am I in the right area there?
Yeah, there's no cap, and we're seeing all these things called nuclear verdicts, which are verdicts that exceed over $1 million, even $10 million, right? And it used to be that there was a de facto cap on this that was about 10 million bucks, right? And that's for, importantly, just pain and suffering. So if you got injured and you have a lifetime of medical care and that's going to run you 20 million, you get all that money, right? I'm just talking about the pain and suffering award that's on top of that, right? So a lot of other states have caps on these pain and suffering judgments. New York doesn't. And what just happened and what's happened in the last year is the cap that we did have that was kind of just imposed by the courts has been blown out of the water. We now have, it used to be 10 million was pretty much the max. Now we're seeing cases that are 20 million, 30 million, 40 million. They're all running their way through the courts. There are these massive pain and suffering awards. And don't get me wrong, these are tough cases, but we had a limit, right? There was a limit for how much this would run you. And you see these crazy cases like somebody won $100 million or something. It always comes down on appeal. And it used to come down to about 10 million because that's where the line in the sand was. That line in the sand is gone now. That line in the sand is blown out. And that's because of the courts, not because of the legislature. And a lot of that is because, in particular, some of these courts, somebody informed me today that the judge, one of the judges in the appellate division, the lawyer that was litigating one of these big nuclear verdict cases, he was on the appellate screening committee. So if this judge wants to move on in their career, they've got to go in front of this lawyer who's arguing for this nuclear verdict. So there's all sorts of these kind of weird conflict of interest problems that we're only just sorting out now. Yeah.
And once again, I think sometimes when we have these conversations, people might miss an important point. You're not talking about a $20 million award for a guy who has to live in a wheelchair or needs every single day kind of nursing care. Important things like that can still total $20 million. That can be a legitimate award.
Get a lifetime of care. You get all that paid for, all of it, everything. I mean, my brother was a quadriplegic from a car accident. We got a settlement. I know how important that is, right? It kept my family going, right? But those are what are called economic damages. That's the money that you're going to pay out. We're talking about non-economic damages, these subjective awards that are on top of what you're actually suing for. And those awards have become these nuclear verdicts, as we call them, really runaway verdicts. But I noticed you just brought 2681 1034 up. Do we want to hit on that? We ready to go?
Actually, look, I want people to hang in there, and I want to have them get to know you better. So your side hustle. And this is where I'm going to ask you to do something for me.
Okay.
All right, guys, I'm going to ask you to do something for me.
All right.
This guy is a charity auctioneer, and so
yes, sir.
What we're about to do is just real quick run us through selling this hat. What can we do with this hat? What can we do for everyone out there?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have an incredible deal for you right now. This incredible hat, you'll notice the 4 lines running along parallel right there on the sides. Those lines, hand-stitched, available to you right now. We're going to start the bidding off at $10. Do I have $10 looking for $10 right now? $10 is the bid, looking for $10, and I have to hammer out, do I have $10? I look like I have $10, now I'm looking for 15. 15 there, and now 20. 20, and now 25. 25, and it's sold, and we're done. We're done, and we just raised some money for what are we raising money for? The Binghamton Boys and Girls Club. How about that?
The Otsego County Libertarian Party could use a few bucks, guys. I'm willing to sell my hat to raise a couple dollars so that we can move forward. We have some great plans coming up, and I just want to point that out. I also have the Otsego County Libertarian Party has an event coming up Saturday at 1:00. Because if you're interested in attending, we're going to play Cornhole for Liberty. We're going to try to raise some money for some charities, maybe 1 or 2. that have been hurt by the COVID corona government response issues. Okay, that we have a charity in our area, and I'm reaching out to them to see if they will take some money from us that actually couldn't do their main function. Every year they do this big, huge event right on the lake that I live at, and they weren't able to do it this year because of the COVID restrictions. So we're going to see if they're interested in what little money we can raise. We're going to try to do some things like that over the course of the coming months to help out local charities that do good deeds, man. I mean, there's several of them. And guys, if you find one in your community and you want to share it and information about it, let me know, because that's what I'm here for. So moving on, we've had a tragedy. This is a tragedy. What's going on here with these laws? What do you think we can do? And let's talk about what they mean and what's going to happen if and when these laws pass all the way through the New York State Senate and Assembly.
Yeah, I mean, the first part, and Tim, you and I, when we first met, we talked about this, is that most people don't realize that their local state senator, their local state assembly person, they don't get contacted that often, right? Like, it's not like a congressperson where, they're getting millions of dollars and there's people in their office all the time and they have these giant staffs. In many cases, they hardly hear from anybody at all. I once had a staffer say, if we get 5 emails or 5 letters on something, we have a meeting. That's a big deal. Most people, I mean, what would you say, Tim? What percentage of people you think know who their state senator is? Know who their assembly person is? 2%?
Yeah.
3%? Right?
I'd go as high as 10%, but
would
I
you
don't
really?
know.
I think you're
much higher than
that. You're a Politico, man. You're in it. You're in it. Most of us, it's not something that's important to us, right? Like, before I was doing this, I was a developer. I didn't know the state senators, state assembly people, and I think most people don't. And so, that would be the first step for anybody at home. You got to find out who that person is, and then feel free to reach out to them, right? They're open for you. And most of the time they're hearing from kind of crazy people in the neighborhood. Go to them, bring up to your concerns, and let them know, because, other than, for a lot of these big issues, they're not hearing from a lot of people other than hacks like me in Albany, and lobbyists, but they don't hear from regular people very much. And, one person, actually, another legislator once told me, if one person contacts them, they believe that means 500 people in their district have that same exact concern.
I think that's a great way to phrase this, guys. If we don't get politically active in New York, and first of all, guys, we've already lost half the battle. Okay, we're in the highest tax state in the nation. Our schools perform on par with Kentucky, and yet we spend 3 times as much money per student as they do. Those are real numbers. You check them out. You want to challenge me on them, go ahead. I don't care. Those are real numbers. We have to come up with answers, solutions, and one of the things that we've got to do is rebuild our communities. And when we're talking about this, taking this centralized power and bills like S1034 and A2681, we need to take a real look at what we're doing to our local small businesses and to our local communities. Do you want to give people a background on what these bills are? S1034, A2681, and how they named it so lovely.
Sure, it's called the New York Heroes Act. But boy, it's not that. Essentially, it is liability for infectious disease. So you heard that right. Business owners.
I can't believe that.
I just can't believe infectious disease. Now, so you're essentially now liable for a virus, which is a problem. And the real problem is the politicians don't really know how to fix the coronavirus, right? They can't do anything. They're state politicians. They can't do anything with the vaccine. They can't do, all that is being handled by other officials, other departments, not the legislature, right? And as you know, the executive Governor Cuomo stepped in and did a lot of the policy making in the outset. So the legislature was like, what should we do? So what they decided to do is pass liability, the New York Heroes Act, S1034, liability for infectious disease. And what this essentially means that if you catch a cold on the job, you can then essentially sue your employer if you felt your employer didn't adequately protect you. And the net outcome of this will be that every business owner is going to now face liability and face lawsuits for infectious disease. And if I'm a personal injury lawyer out there who's struggling to make ends meet with the slip and falls because nobody's out walking around during the pandemic, I'm going to hang out a new shingle, and I am going to just start suing businesses for possible infectious disease. And importantly, you don't even need to catch the disease. You just need to have a worker who believes that you didn't follow the protocols properly, right? And what are those protocols? I don't know. The Department of Health is the one that's going to release that. But has the Department of Health been right throughout all of this? Absolutely not. It's changing all the time. We don't even know what it is today, right? What we knew today versus what we knew 5 months ago versus what we knew 10 months ago is entirely different. So they could be legislating, the Department of Health could be putting in these new rules that you can get sued over, right? Not by the Department of Health, but by some jack-a-mole two-bit attorney who lives in your town who's suing everybody in the entire county, right? This is not a regulator issue. This is not the government coming down on you. This is the government deputizing profit-seeking attorneys to take you out and to take your businesses and to sue you and get every drop that they can. That's what it is, right? So, I know you guys as libertarians, you're worried about the impact of government and what is a regulator going to do. This is not the regulator. This is the government empowering the power of the state, essentially, to profit-seeking lawyers, right? Obviously, that's going to go bad.
Let's see if we can field a question here from Mr. Patel once again. What is different in the B version? 10B, private right of action, is still there, and that's exactly what you're talking about, right? People can sue for whatever they want to if they get the sniffles at work. But even if they don't get the sniffles at work, they go to work and the employer isn't following the new health department regulations, which are obviously unclear at this point. Isn't that really the problem? They can get the sniffles anywhere and go sue their employer just after they show up.
How many people get it? They don't need to get sick, right? So you can imagine you just have a lawyer who hangs out or he sends his paralegals or whatever to the parking lot outside some business and just has some checklist. Like, did your employer do these things? If not, they didn't do number 4. Great. Well, would you be willing to, sue your employer? You can quit working and you can start making money with me, right? You will sue your employer and that'll be how you make money. That can be how this is done because you don't have to get sick. You just have to feel that your employer is not following the rules. Now, Rich brings up a question. There was a B version that was introduced, an amended version. And what does that amended version do? That amended version now says that there is a provision that if the judge feels that the lawsuit was malicious harassment or something thereof, if the lawsuit was malicious harassment, then the judge can impose sanctions on the attorney. That is, penalties on the attorney. Now, the assembly says this is the protections that the businesses need. Hogwash. It doesn't protect you at all. You are never going to be able to prove malicious harassment, right? If the lawyer is out there to make money, right? Yeah. They're not there to piss you off. They're there to take your money. Now, I dare you to prove that a lawyer is actually trying to piss you off and not take your money. They're trying to do both. That's what they do. And there's no way you're going to prove that it's just malicious harassment. That it's just not going to happen. There's going to be some sort of cause, and that's what they're going to come after you for. So this B version, this protection that they put in there, is a total smoke and mirrors. It does nothing. I don't think there's a defense attorney in the world that would tell you that B version offers any protections to business at all.
One of the things that really ticked me off the first time I read this bill was, I think it started line 17. Shall not include employees of the state, any political subdivision of the state, a public authority, or any other governmental agency or instrumentality.
You got it. You got it, man.
Laws for thee, but not for me.
Right.
This is complete bullshit.
Exactly. Yeah. So you know, the legislature who's passing these laws, they don't have to comply by them, nor do any of their friends who are, you know, administrators in any government activity. So no government entity has to follow these rules at all, nor are they liable in any way.
And I'm wondering how many other laws are written with that hidden in the line somewhere.
Yeah, more than you'd think.
They exempt, and we see this all the time. They exempt themselves from their own laws. Like somehow the guy on the street corner selling hot dogs is more selfish and more careless about his employees than they are. I just get gobsmacked when we see this constant. I don't know. I might lose my mind right here. Somebody walk me back off this ledge here.
They do it all the time with liability issues, right? So they have a different statute of limitations than we do. They have requirements that you have to file these various notices and all these different things if you're going to sue the government, right? We, as private citizens, we are afforded no such protections, but they've deigned to give them to themselves because they know what a danger this can be. They know that we have essentially a for-profit legal system in this country, and that for-profit legal system is dangerous when it comes for you. And now it is going to come for any business. Now, I want to essentially point out, though, that it is businesses that are more than 10 people, right? So they tried to exempt small businesses, and that was originally 25 people, and they moved that down to 10, or I think it might have been at 10, and the small businesses were like, guys, there's not a lot of small businesses that are at that 10 below thing. You really want to move that up to 25, and that's small business, right? And unfortunately, they did not do that. And the question is, what protection is this actually going to provide, right? Once we're all vaccinated and whatnot, you know, what protection is this going to provide after the COVID-19 pandemic? It is going to provide no health protection. And what it is going to do is incentivize a wave of lawsuits and a rash of attorneys who are going to file lawsuits against every small business that they can. We've seen this a lot with Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, my brother is a quadriplegic. I believe in the Americans with Disabilities Act. I believe it's an important piece of legislation. But you have these attorneys that file 300, 400 lawsuits a year, and they sue everybody on the street with the same cut and paste lawsuit. And then the businesses that don't want to, that tell them to go screw, they just keep filing continuances. All they want is a settlement, right? So none of this is actually going to fix anything. They just want their money. And if you give them their money, they'll go away, right?
I hope you don't mind me interrupting you there. But at Tom for 52, our buddy Thomas Daniel Creeder, he ran against Fred Akshar in Senate District 52. He is differently abled. He has a wheelchair. And Tom, don't get mad at me if I don't say it right, all right? You were supposed to be on the show. I'm not sure what happened. But he can tell you face-to-face, person-to-person about the American Disabilities Act and how it does not help him in any way that it purports to help him, okay? And how handicap accessibility is not exactly handicap accessibility, that they don't really craft it with people in mind, and that how it has become a boon and a boondoggle at the same time for trial lawyers and for people that are handicapped. It's a real problem. He explains it as well as you did, maybe even better because he lives that life himself sometimes. He's also like really a great guy, very brave soul, and he takes these things on head on. And that's why he got a whole bunch of votes in Senate District 52 when he took on Fred Akshar in the 2020 race.
Yeah,
and
I'll give you a good example of
his direction.
I'll give you a good example of an ADA case where these people filed an Americans with Disability Act case against a Subway sandwich shop, alleging that the bathroom was non-compliant. Problem is there was no bathroom. Right. So they just cut and pasted this lawsuit over and over. And then they said, your bathroom's not compliant. And there was no bathroom in the facility at all. It was a Subway sandwich shop in another building. Right. And so they didn't have a restroom on the premises. And so they go in front of the judge, and the judge says, hey, I noticed that there's no bathroom and you're suing for this non-compliant bathroom. And he's like, oh, judge, I'm sorry, but my client can't be here today. Okay, well, when can your client be here? My client actually moved and is not available. Okay, well, can we get your client? Well, no, actually, my client has moved internationally. He's moved to Europe.
Oh, my God.
Okay, well, can we get him on Skype or something like that? Actually, he's camping indefinitely in a foreign country.
Oh, my God.
As I said, my brother was quadriplegic. We didn't go camping. Right? That's not a family activity that we did a lot with my brother, right? Like and yet this judge, should have initiated sanctions against that attorney. And in fact, it was the judge that got sanctioned because he sent a member of the court to confirm that this facility didn't have a bathroom. And in doing so, that was against the rules, right? So rather than the attorney who was clearly making up a fake client getting sanctioned by the court, the judge gets sanctioned for going outside the rules to try to prove that this, in fact, there was no bathroom on this facility. And we see this all the time on these ADA cases. Somebody sued, their clients didn't even know that they were suing on their behalf. We had another guy, he was suing and he was saying he was in a wheelchair. Turned out he wasn't in a wheelchair. And so we're going to, that same kind of abuse that we've seen with the American Disabilities Act, we're going to start seeing that with this so-called New York Heroes Act. And that's going to be a real problem.
It's almost like our legislators craft laws that benefit a huge industry in New York State. Okay, like I don't want to speak out of turn here, but the New York trial lawyers make a lot of money.
Tim, are you saying that politics and money are connected?
I, as a libertarian, know that politics and money are connected, and I'm trying to convince other people of that exact issue. I'm absolutely going out of my way to do it.
Yeah, libertarians and conspiracy theories, man. That's all I
I knew this was some kind of conspiracy show.
Look at the line there. Conspiracy theorist, conspiracy realist. I mean, am I just making this stuff up? I don't know. I don't think so. We see it everywhere. Right.
I mean, the money, the trial lawyers, they make the money. They give the money to the politicians. The politicians pass laws so that they can, they can file more lawsuits. And then with the money they get from the lawsuits, they give more to the politicians. And then we see these backdoor deals, like with the former Speaker of the Assembly, Sheldon Silver.
Don't even get me started, man.
Okay,
go ahead.
Well, I mean, as you know, or for those of you who don't, our former esteemed Speaker of the Assembly was arrested for the kickback deal that he had with an asbestos law firm. And asbestos is a great example of how profitable this is. Fun fact for you, at least a couple of years ago, 4 of the top 5 most expensive Google search terms were asbestos related. They were asbestos lawyer, mesothelioma litigation, whatever. And you guys have seen this. You see you know the word mesothelioma. Why do you know that? Because of TV ads, right? It's an incredibly profitable business, and that's why they felt it was necessary to pay the speaker. I think they were paying him $750,000 a year in of counsel payments.
Listen, guys, that is real. Okay, that's an actual reality. These guys get kickbacks from businesses that they represent while they're supposed to be doing the people's business. This happens all the time. It happens especially with lawyers. But the bottom line is that they all get donations from big, huge businesses that are paying for regulations that benefit their business or laws that benefit their industry, like the trial lawyer industry. Okay, like this is not made up. This isn't a conspiracy. This is absolute reality. We saw it, guys, last year somewhere along the lines. One of our assembly people owns a haircutting training center and decided that she should introduce a law that offers licenses to people that wash hair in hair cutting places. So because she owns a training facility, she literally offered a law that would benefit her business.
Yeah.
To get a license to wash hair is one of the craziest things that I've ever heard, but they don't even care. They don't realize, or worse, people actually supported the concept that we should license people to wash hair in a hair cutting facility. I don't even know how we get there. How do we get there?
Yeah, I mean,
it comes with what, 50 hours of training or something you got to do to make sure you don't get soap in someone's eye. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it costing like $13,000 for that training, but don't worry, we'll grant you the money so that my business can get $13,000 to train you how to wash hair and not get soap in someone's eye. And then they still have to probably sign a liability waiver that if I get soap in your eye, you can't sue me. I mean, I'll be honest with you. That's how it's got to work, or else I wouldn't wash hair ever. Sign this liability waiver or I'm not washing your hair. That's it.
I mean,
not that I'm going to wash anybody's hair anyway.
Conflict of interest law, right? Like we had the same issue with former Senator DeFrancisco. He tried to pass a law that said that lawyers could charge more for their fees, right? So, you know, they had certain caps, certain limitations that they can charge in their fees. And he, as a medical malpractice lawyer in Syracuse, tried to get a bill passed that allowed them to get more in fees. And it was just so egregious. And it made my job very easy because I could go to the media and tell them about it, and they covered the story because all you needed is finger paint, and you could have figured out that that's a conflict of interest. I mean, he basically is a lawyer saying lawyers should get more money from their clients, right? And, you know, 33% is already quite a lot, right? And that's another thing that kills me with the scaffold law case. They don't need to prove negligence, and yet they still get 33%. They don't have to even do their job, and they still get their 33%.
Going back to the ADA thing, can't that just be like a shakedown artist? Like, look, I'm going to sue you, or you got to pay me $1,000 or $10,000. Like, it seems like they could pull that system.
That's what they do, right? So they try to pick a number that is just so that it's the economically smart decision for you to pay them off, right? So if they say, give me $5,000, they know that it's going to cost you $6,000 to get an attorney to defend you, right? So it's an economically smart decision for you to just pay them off rather than hire your own lawyer. And that's what they're really doing. They're settlement hunting. They're not actually trying to litigate these cases. ADA cases are never litigated in the state of New York. They're settled. And that's what these parasites rely on.
So, guys, we're coming up on an hour, and that's generally how long I like to do these things. Yeah. First of all, Tom, you would be welcome back on any time.
Fun. This was a blast.
This is the funnest part. We had great numbers in the audience. We didn't get a lot of comments. I think that's probably because of the esoteric nature of what we were discussing. Yeah, people had more trying to digest it.
Law. It's still got to be a little legalese.
Yeah, right. But coming up on Wednesday night, Colin Graybo from Cato, myself and Rich, and I'm not sure who else is going to be joining us, but we're going to do another one of these live things where we talk about the unintended consequences of recycling, how property tax caps are a bunch of nonsense. And guys, I know some of this stuff is boring, but first of all, Rich is very interesting. He's a great leader. He's doing a great job with the LPNY and bringing issues like Tom, what you're talking about, I may never have been aware of it if it wasn't for Rich's proactivity here. Though Amy has mentioned scaffold law several times in the past, but still, Rich is doing a great job. He's running for office. I want to support him. I want everyone to support him, and I also want people to come back and join us when we're talking to Colin Graybo. Which, not to say that guy's better than you, Tom, because this was an absolute blast, right? I mean, Amy, this is great. I love what you do. Guys, let's circle back around to S1034 and A2681 for a minute. You have to contact your senator tomorrow, because if we don't, the cat ladies are going to contact them and be like, what a great idea. I love heroes. So let's get on the horn, find your assemblyman, find your senator, tell your assemblyman you made a mistake if you voted for this, and find your senator and tell him to kill this bill because it's just a boon for trial lawyers, right? Is that the easiest way to say it, or do you have a better way you want to put it out there?
That's it. I mean, it's just unnecessary liability on businesses that's not going to protect anybody.
It's not. It literally can't. It becomes an imaginary thing to sue for. You could get the sniffles anywhere, and then to sue your employer, or you can be afraid of getting the sniffles anywhere, and then go blame your employer for your fear and start a lawsuit. And neither one of those things is productive for any kind of business in New York State.
Especially as businesses are trying to recover right now, right? Like so many of these small businesses, you think about the restaurants and the bars who have a full year of revenues just taken from them. How are they going to be able to deal with this? They're trying to get their businesses back up and running. And now you're going to be, ramming all these new provisions down their throats, and they have to comply, else they're going to get sued by some two-bit attorney.
Yeah, and not all attorneys are two-bit. My oldest daughter is an attorney, so we don't hate all of these attorneys, but there is a very real trial law industry that makes a very real amount of money through what I would call unethical business practices. These guys are Anyway, so I got a question for you guys. How many
There's good attorneys out there? I just want to be clear. There's good attorneys, and there's good plaintiffs' attorneys. There's good personal injury lawyers out there. But there's ones out there that are unethical, and they're just trying to get settlements from anybody they can.
So I got a question for you guys. As we see in the face of COVID spikes, in the face of rising activity, in the face of the COVID passport, how many accusers is it going to take for Governor Andrew Cuomo to issue an executive order and cut all of our taxes? What do you guys think? You got a number out there?
I'm not going to touch that one, Tim. You're killing me.
I'm just saying, COVID cases were spiking. He's letting bars and restaurants stay open. So what we need to know is how many accusers is it going to take for a tax cut? Period. That's it. And if you can answer
no tax cut, none.
None. we gotta get to work on getting to that level of accusers, guys. Let's say it's 14. I don't know, but let's find them. Let's make some more accusations. Let's get ourselves a tax cut. What do you guys say?
There could be 372. I don't think he's cutting anything. He wants a bigger salary.
I agree with you. Tom, thank you very much. I love what you're doing. You're welcome back anytime. Emmy, as always, a pleasure, because I have a blast doing this stuff. So thank you all. I'm going to cut the broadcast off right here. And if you guys want to hang out for a minute or two, please do. Okay.
All right. Good to see you, everybody. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Amy.
Yep. Thank you.